Hello, everyone. My name is Shuntray, as you all know. I want to first say thank you for participating in my Zoom call and this discussion. Tonight,
Awesome.
tonight we're going to be talking about the Afrocentric perspective in our community and how we see it in our everyday lives, as well as what it means to us.
Awesome.
But before we get started, let us pray, okay? Let's get a word of prayer. Oh, gracious God, Lord, we thank you for this time to come together and have a dialogue about our ancestors and our culture. Lord, we ask that you touch each and every one of us, God. Give us wisdom and insight and understanding as what you will have us to learn or have me to learn through this process. We thank you. We give you honor, glory, and praise. Amen.
Man.
Okay, so would you guys do me a favor and introduce yourselves? Start with you, Brother Pitts.
Hey, man. Henry Pitts, MDiv graduate from the ITC class of Shout Out 2021. Husband of one. Father of one pretty baby girl. Been in ministry, been married about 10 years, been in ministry about the same amount of time. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What's your occupation? What's your profession, sir?
I'm an investigator with the Cobb County Public Defender's Office. I've been with DeKalb County some 14 years now. I'm also in the construction industry part-time, working with a family-owned business doing tile, high-end residential.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Come on, Sister Reverend Webb.
Hi, my name is Dewelver Webb. I am a chaplain. I own a hospice. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm glad to have you. And the great bishop at the bottom. Introduce yourself for me.
Lord have mercy. I am officially an overseer of the Royal Shedrick. I serve as overseer and pastor. I'm also a chaplain and soon to be a resident, chaplain resident in the hospital. I also do offer pastoral care counseling as well, under marriage and family. And that's about it. And I am a 2021 graduate of EITC, along with my brother, the Right Reverend Henry Pitts.
All right, the Right Reverend. Well, tonight,
Lord, we pray.
well, tonight I want to again say thank you. I wish we was all together in one room. I would have brought us something to eat. I would have prepared dinner.
Oh, man.
But I thank you guys for coming and being a part of this project. I want to have this discussion about Afrocentric and Afrocentrism. Just kind of, if you would, each one of you kind of tell me what your definition of Afrocentric is.
I guess I'll just go first. In my estimation, Afrocentric or Afrocentrism, if I'm saying it correctly, is to center life, thought, belief, and African-centered philosophies and ideologies and spiritualities at the center of our very being. It is to see Africa as the center of the world and not European or the Middle Near East. It is to center our thoughts, our beliefs, and our history first from that very place and space, and to attempt to live our lives and center ourselves in our communities from that perspective.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Reverend Webb. Are you there, Reverend Webb?
You on mute? I can't hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Rev. Reverend Webb, are you? I'm like, okay, y'all, I'm new to this, but I'm gonna figure it out before it's over. I got 3 years to learn. Reverend Webb. Give me your
Yes, ma'am.
give me your perspective on the word Afrocentric and Afrocentrism. What does that mean to you?
To me, what my understanding of Afrocentric or Afrocentristic its meaning is empowering our community, the African American community. And as I didn't get the other participant's name, but building off on what he said, it uplifts a theology about what our history, our ancestry lines draw from, bringing it forward into our communities and how it can build our communities or rebuild our communities and make them stronger.
Thank you, ma'am. Overseer Shedrick, give me your perspective of the word Afrocentric and what does that mean to you?
For me, percent is to have a base in the culture and the historical practices that derive from African culture instead of Western culture and theology. So for me, Afrocentric means to have a base that starts and finds its origins and its practices from the culture, the beliefs, and the social constructs that begin in Africa as a center, opposed to what we see here, which is normally a backdrop that is formulated everything off of a Western cultural, theological, social base.
Overseer, it's so funny you said that because I had a writing piece I had to do with this assignment. And one of the things that I was enlightened to about myself is the way that I was reared. I come from a small country town, Bainbridge, Georgia. And I oftentimes tell people that I was sheltered as a child. I've never heard the word Afrocentric. My parents didn't have higher education. And most of my life, I've been taught to mimic the Western culture and the Europeans and things of that nature. So I never really had the opportunity to learn about the African culture. So for me, I'm wrestling with this Afrocentric piece, the rich culture of Africa. I'm wrestling with that because I wasn't reared that way. So I oftentimes wonder, what does that look like every day? Or how am I supposed to take this word Afrocentric and apply it to my life and what in my line of work and my studies, when to be honest with you, I'm kind of like, don't know much about it. So can you guys help me with that?
I think for me, it's too simplified as just to think black first. Or to think African first or African American first. For example, I was the complete opposite. I grew up in a small country town as well, Tuskegee, Alabama, for someone who may see this. And like many towns, the sports and activities for kids was the local YMCA. And there was a point when I was a kid where I guess the funding dried up and parents or the city or whoever was in charge of that couldn't afford it. And we had a Little League coach who converted to Islam. And he kind of took over the YMCA. And in him doing that, our Little League teams, which a lot of Little League teams do, name themselves as the NFL teams, which come from Western Europe.
Excuse me a minute. Reverend Well, can you please mute your phone? Because I can hear what you're doing in the background.
I wasn't doing anything, but go ahead.
I keep hearing like noises. Just can you mute it? And and you can unmute when it's time to speak. Thank you.
So in short, I remember vividly him changing the name of our teams from Indians and Cowboys and et cetera, Raiders, to Nubian Warriors. And we were tripped out, but he educated us through the years in African warriors and Ghanaian people and Western Aruba people and all these different. Now, I really didn't understand in totality as a 9, 10, 11-year-old, but most of our teachers were Black, and they taught a lot about Black history. When we were kids, we would read, our school trip was the George Washington Carver Museum or the Booker T. Washington Museum every year, or the Rosa Parks Museum. We sung the Black Negro National Anthem as a kid, you know, and things of that nature. Now, I didn't fully understand this, but, you know, to go to college, most of our graduates went to HBCUs. It was unique to go to a Georgia or Auburn or a white institution. So I was reared from as far back as I can remember to think Black first and to put African Americans first and to not feel bad or sad to not do that. And so I think in our social reality, a way for that to show up is to, well, at least what I do is try to highlight the identity piece. ITC always asks us, you know, who are you and who do you be, you know, and everything in society, I think, is from a European white perspective, but to encourage and to love folks enough to say, put yourself first, not in a selfish individual perspective, but to just think Black first, to think about your community first, because everyone else does it, and don't make any apologies about it.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Reverend Webb, help me out, because I heard Reverend Pitt say most of his teachers was African American. I had the opposite experience. All my teachers were Caucasian. Even my principal was Caucasian. I don't think I got an African American principal until I got to high school, and he was the assistant principal. So I'm wrestling, like, you know, I don't know. My mom and dad always taught me, you know, go to their schools, learn what they learned, then, you know, be better than them. And then that way you don't have to ask them for nothing, you know. And so in my studies, I'm like, I don't know nothing about the culture. What you were saying about the Nubian, I don't know. I've never heard any of that. And I see why God sent me to Clark Atlanta University. That's why I did my undergrad. But if I had not gotten my undergrad, it would have been bad, because I wouldn't have knew how to function at ITC. Ms. Webb, help me out. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. For me, I grew up in Colorado. My mother was an African American history teacher. They called it Afro-American Civics World History. So I grew up learning everything there was about Black history, African history, and how slavery affected us. Also, at the age of 13, I converted to Islam. So that took on a whole nother life of itself, of learning about who I was and how did I fit into this space in America, of what we should be or how we should be. I've always wrestled against that. However, learning what I've learned about and through my journey, not just my spiritual journey, but my educational journey. I went to a HBCU, UAPB. Mm-hmm. So learning what I learned about Afrocentrism, to me, walking this walk, it means to be greater than. Because if you look at what we're referring to, we're talking about a history that comes out of a land that all other life sprang from. We're talking about a land where everything that came from Africa and was created in Africa was greater than everything that has been created after. Mm-hmm. We'll also have to look at the way that the continent is, the way it is today. So for me, yes, I love my people. I love Black folk, as they say. However, not only, and just to piggyback on a little bit of what the other participants said, it's not just about putting our community first. It's about how do we uplift that community and show the generations to come how to do it better, or how to be better than. I always taught my children, you never settle for mediocrity, because you have the history of Africa beaten inside of you. You already have to be great. What they tell you you're going to be, or what they say that this is all you can be, you don't have to settle for that, because you're greater than that. So not only are we putting our community first, but we also have to look at how we are putting ourselves and our Blackness first. Mm-hmm. But we also have to look even within ourselves at how are we better, or how to make it better, or how to be our best selves. Because to say that my ancestors came from Africa, was enslaved, and came out of slavery and did the things that my ancestors did, owned land, one of the first, he bought, my great-grandfather bought his freedom and owned land in Arkansas, was one of the first African Americans to do that. How do I live up to that greatness, where we don't have to be beholden to anyone else? So your question was, what does that look like? So that's two parts. What does that look like for me being an African American, plus being an African American female? That's two parts. Number one, community first, self first, how to be greater than, but also how to embrace every aspect of being a Black woman or an African American female in this society, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how to bring that together and say, hey, this is me, but still I can achieve. We have a lot of times we have this sense of we have to look one particular way, or we have to act one particular way, but we don't. We're still in this Black skin and accepting ourselves for who we are. So putting our community first, uplifting that community to show how we can be greater, or even ourselves, and then embracing everything that we are as the African American descendants, and then moving forward in a more positive way. I'm sorry, I got cut out. And then moving forward in a positive way, being who you are. And if you don't know who you are, you're going to have to do some soul searching. But once you discover who you are a Black woman, or you are a Black male, or you are a Black child. And because of that, you are great. And then how do we build on that? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, you said something that got me to thinking when you was talking about, our ancestors being slaves and things of that nature. It's so funny because that's kind of where my ancestors and my family were stuck. I've never heard pre-slavery, anything about pre-slavery. I've never heard that Africans was the superior people, and I've never heard that there was riches and gold and, we was kings and queens. I've never heard that. So, but I've always heard they better than us. They gonna make rules for them. They can break all the rules, but my blacks better not break the rules. Or I've always heard, white folks can get away with everything, but we can't get away with nothing. That's why you got to learn their laws and go to their school and try to do better than them, because if not, they'll try to take everything you got. They'll steal your land. And they always got that story what happened to one African American ancestor, where they stole the land, took the land, and things of that nature. And so that's all I've ever heard. I've never heard the other part, before we became, who were we before we became slaves? Who were we before you took us away from Africa? I've never heard that piece. I've always heard the sad stories about slavery, which is, they just make me want to just go and do something I ain't got no business. But I've always heard those stories. But so yeah, I definitely hear everything you saying, and being a black woman. Oh Jesus, yes Lord, I love my black femininity. All right, Overseer Shed, huh?
No, go ahead.
All right, Overseer Shedrick, what you got to say about help a sister out? Help me out.
With everything that I'm hearing, and just from my knowledge, I'm kind of with Pitts. I grew up in Southwest Atlanta, just a few miles from the West End and the AUC, and I experienced that, Afrocentric atmosphere that was cultivated in the West End area growing up in the 80s and 90s. And one of the things that I have recognized, and when I was at the ITC, we dialogued about this on several occasions, and that is the difficulty of operating fully, or attempting to operate fully, from an Afrocentric perspective in a westernized society. Because a lot of times we don't even realize the many ways of our movement that are attached to Western thought, and with even from the way we run our businesses within this Western society. Even though I was right there in the West End, as I reflect back and look over a lot of the things that I witnessed, a lot of times I can pinpoint Western thought that went into different practices. But then you had those which Reverend Pitts was referring to, especially in the Muslim faith, and the Shrine of the Black Madonna, and entities like that who practice this Afrocentrism in the purest state that they possibly could within a Western society. So for me, when we talk about Afrocentric, one is the understanding of being, because I believe that it all starts with us individually, as we take our individual understanding and we come together to form community. Because once we understand our being as Africans, and it's funny that we even consider ourselves and we refer to ourselves as African American. As we refer to ourselves as African American, you cannot escape within that Western thought. Yes, you're African, but you have a Western imprint on you. As Reverend Weld was saying, from our education, unless you went to, elementary school and middle school and high school that had that Afrocentric thought, we were all conditioned and taught from Western books. So socially, our construct that we now, as we begin to learn about Afrocentrism and that Afrocentric perspective, we now have to go back and deconstruct a lot of the things that were taught to us, so that we can, as Dr. Godman would say, know who we be. Because I believe that is the key and the source to Afrocentrism. Is it begins with knowing who you be as an African, who you be as a descendant of those from the continent of Africa, and knowing your connection to that history. And when we can make that connection, then it becomes a lot easier for us to identify when we are moving and operating and conducting our social structures, our way of life that are westernized, opposed to what fits our dynamic and our diaspora people. and we can remove some of those things that kind of become a strife and a conflict that keep us from, being able to work. Like you hear people say, oh, why we don't support black businesses? Well, that's because a lot of times when we look at black businesses, we're looking from a Western perspective, and we're holding them to a Western standard instead of looking through that Afrocentric lens and being there to uplift the community instead of having an Ubuntu perspective that if you are, then I am. Then when we have those type of understandings, then we can come together as a collective and we can build. But from a Western standpoint, when we're always looking at things from a Western lens, that's where you get these theologies and people saying things like get rich or die trying, or it's me against the world. That's a Western thought. That has nothing to do with that Afrocentric perspective.
Talk good, sir.
I mean,
Can I
Go ahead.
say something? It's a couple of things that I heard, and really, I just want to just put something in there. And I heard you say several times about our thought, and you used one example of why some of us say we don't frequent or visit black-owned businesses, and you're saying that. And I just want to be clear, you're saying that it's part of a Western thought where we're holding them to a Westernized standard. Is that what you were saying? I just want to be clear on that.
Yes, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, because we have been reared and formulated into a Western way of thinking when it comes to business, when it comes to relationships, even when it comes to socialization. It is up under a Western construct, and it's hard for us to accept a lot of times, but until we look at the Afrocentric way of life and hold it up against the way that we operate here in Western society, do we realize a lot of the ways that we even interact with one another at times is more Western than it is African.
Okay, so I'm glad I got clarity, and I was on the same line. I understand that. So this is something that, and I don't know if we've had discussion about this in our circle before. When I said knowing where you come from, when she asked me what my definition was, when I spoke knowing where you come from and knowing that where we come from makes us greater than, okay, because of everything that was built, everything that came from Africa is greater than everything that came behind it. And so when you say that we're looking at the reason we don't frequent black-owned businesses is because of a Westernized thought, that I agree some of them. However, if you go into a black-owned business and they give you this, may I help you? I'm not frequenting you because your attitude is bad or because you don't make yourself better. There are many times, and that's why I said we have to teach our community how to understand or put that African construct within them to make things better. Why should I come to your place of business when it's less than? Now, I can come in here every day, eat your food or do whatever and visit your establishment, but if it's less than, how do we get them to understand that you need to step your game up? That could be why no one is frequenting your establishment, because we tend to, and I hear that a lot. And understand, I'm one of the most militant black women there is because of my spiritual journey. But we have to stop giving a free pass because they are part of our community. Until we have to teach them how to build themselves up and make themselves better. And then not only will you get your African American, or I don't identify, and that's a whole different thing. I love my African roots. I'm a black woman living a black woman experience in these folks' America. And so when we do that and we give people a pass, I'm going to go there because they're Black. That's not helping them. Teaching them how to better their environment to invite people in is where we start saying, hey, this is how I'm going to live that Afrocentric thought or theology in my community. Just allowing our people to be mediocre is not what Africa is about.
Well, let me interrupt you right there, Miss Well. Let me interrupt because you going a different way, and I want to kind of keep it. I want to kind of keep it for the sake of time. I want to stay focused on the topic at hand, which is being Afrocentric and the concept of Afrocentric. Now, I heard you say you was explaining. You gave that example about the young Black lady with the attitude, so to speak, when you go into an establishment, and that we have to teach her how to, be better, or in so many words, have better customer service. So my question is this: what standard are we judging her character by? Because even though she may come off like that, who's to say that's not the Afrocentric way? Who's to say that that's not her love language? Who's to say that that's not how we function in Africa? So my question is, what standard do we have to measure her behavior? Because you can't say it's from my perspective. You can't say it's from the Afrocentric space if she don't know what that is. So in order for and half of us, to be honest, we don't really know what that is. We're still learning. I know myself is. So what standard do you have to measure the way that she's conducting herself, or what tells you that the way she's conducting herself is improper, is not the Afrocentric way? What's the lens that you're looking through?
Okay, before you said, hold on, that's what I was about to go into.
Okay.
As a Muslim, and even today, I have conversated, and I have really dove into African culture and what different things mean and how they rear their children. I have a friend right now who is Nigerian.
You're still not answering the question. I need to know the lens, because my time is running out.
The way that they're rearing their children are respect. The way they conversate is not along that line. So as I grew up and in my journey, I expect us, and it's not about westernized theology, but I expect, and what I am judging them by is what I was taught from an African perspective, because we lived in community. So that's where my perspective is coming from. You respect your elders, you respect the household, and you're very respectful in the community. So when you say that, again, I say, how do we teach our community how to be better from an African or Afrocentric perspective?
Can I speak on that? That's the key point that separates us. Using hospice, for example, a lot of times in westernized communities, when their elderly fall ill, they send them to a hospice facility because they consider them to be of no more use. Whereas in the African community, they depending on where they are in life, they can achieve the status of becoming an elder. They are cherished. And even here in the Americas, you always hear people say, Big Mama ain't going nowhere. She gonna stay right here. We're gonna figure out a way to take care of her. And that goes back to that thought of Ubuntu. And what that means is, whether it's a business, whatever it is, you are a reflection of me. We are not individuals, but we are community. So if your business doesn't do well, that's a reflection of us. You're not just out there on your own. We just gonna stop supporting you. No, we're gonna rally around you. We're gonna hold you to accountability of what we as a community, as a village. And that's what I would see, the reference that I gave in the West End, the Afrocentrism. There was a standard. They held each other accountable. They helped each other. They assisted each other, whether it was repairs that needed to be done on the facilities. And regardless, it didn't matter, what needed to be done. That was not a reason for them to opt out, to go take their services somewhere else. It was just as important for the person with the shanty shack business to thrive as the person who had, the well-refined establishment. They all understood that we are all a part of this community, and we need for all of us to thrive in order for there to be a community. Because any other way, then if this one person is becoming successful, then it's top heavy, like you see in a lot of our churches and institutions today. And that's Western thought. Whenever you see, we're going to go with the biggest and the best, that's a Western thought. It's very top heavy. It's, that, like I said, that get rich or die trying, only the strong survive. All that's from a Western thought. Afrocentric thought says that we all must make it. In order for us to be successful, the village, the community must thrive. So we are responsible for each other. Instead of saying, well, that's on them, they can't get their stuff together, then, they just go out of business, oh well. So
if I can add to what you're saying briefly, I think part of doing that is having the tough conversations with our people, with our community. We're talking about business, and my understanding of Du Bois' piece of double consciousness, we cannot escape the reality that we live in a Western capitalistic society. So a lot of our approaches are going to have a white Eurocentric capitalistic lens. So when the woman of God asked that question, what is the standard? To be honest, the standard is excellence across the board. Chick-fil-A is not black owned, but most of us like it because the customer service is good and you know what you're getting. Versus, certain black establishments, it might be hit or miss. It's our job, I think, if we're approaching or practicing Ubuntu or practicing this Afrocentrality, is to pull them to the side and say, hey, sis, now I'm going to support you because you're black, but my collard greens was cold. My chicken wasn't cooked. You want me to spend $15? Hey, I'm going to need this a little better. You know what I mean? And to give it some time, but to go back and try to visit. Me and the man of God had met at Greenbrier Mall and went in Madu bookstores, and I had a conversation with the owner of black-owned business and saying, mother, your books twice the price as Amazon. They cheaper at this bookstore. And she explained as a small black-owned business why that's the case. But her customer service is good, and because she's a black-owned business, I will bypass 5 stores to frequent her store. So that's just a couple of examples. I think the standard is, unfortunately, a European, westernized, capitalistic system of excellence, a free enterprise system. It's a game we have to play. But in that, we can practice Ubuntu and build our Black Wall Streets again, build our Auburn Avenues again, build our Tulsas again. But we have to have some tough, honest conversations, because that's just the society we live in.
I want to just kind of interject. I totally agree. And one thing I do know, back in the day, when everything was segregated, rather Big Mama was nice, rather it didn't matter. It was against the law for you to go over there at them white folks' establishments. Your butt going to jail, or you're gonna get killed, or whatever they're gonna do to you. So I like the Ubuntu, which bring the community. I like what you said, Apostle Shedrick, about that, because oftentimes, even with the young lady that may have had the bad attitude at the restaurant, as a chaplain, I've learned that there could be an underlying issue. There could be something else going on within her where she may have taken it out on you, but you really not you're not the problem. So as a chaplain, I would say, sis, what's wrong? Let's talk about what's going on. You snapped on me, but a lot of customers don't have that time. They just want what they want, and they want it to be right. I'm spending my money here, and I want what I want. So that's just my spiel on that. Any closing remarks before we end? I appreciate y'all. Y'all helping me out.
Yeah, I just like to say I enjoyed this conversation. It's great dialogue, and I think that's the slippery slope that we go on when we deal with this Afrocentrism in a Western world. Is because we do have standards, but at what point do we take the time to pull everybody? At what point do we say, no, we're not just going to leave you right here? You got to make it. We all need to make it. Of course, some won't, they just stuck. They won't get it. That's the harsh reality. They are stuck in a certain mindset. But for those that we can pull, for those that we can bring into this Afrocentric way of life and building community and building village, we want to pull for them.
I think in closing, the greatest example is to what you started off with, not to just do it, but to be it. Mm-hmm. By affecting the individuals closest to us, not just preaching a sermon or teaching a lecture, but living it out, being a living epistle, a real example of what it looks like, of being excellent, of working hard, being great, operating in what our ancestors will want us to live up to, just building upon their legacy, going a step further. Sometimes that look like going the extra mile. Sometimes that look like being twice as smart and working twice as hard. But we can excel and exceed in the midst of. Sometimes you might have to make brick with no straw. That's just the hand we were dealt. Yet in the midst of that, I believe we serve a creator and a God who will empower us to do as such. To me, that's excellence. To me, that's greatness. And to me, that's an example for those, as Reverend Webb said, for those behind us to follow. And if they don't see that, not just hear that, but see that, then we will be taking 2 steps back and not 4 forward.
Man, for me, first let me say thank you all. This is something that I battle with every day. But again, for me, I think reaching back and teaching that younger generation about who they are, where they came from, because there has been a disconnect from where we were prior to the civil rights movement and where we are now. Because we were in those communities together. Mm-hmm. And we were going to learn whether we wanted to or not, because it was right there in our face. But as the Civil Rights Bill was passed and we began to see new opportunities or new areas where we could move away from our communities, those things were lost. So right now, for me, it's always reaching back. Grandchildren and other folk grandchildren, kids in high school, kids in middle school, coming in contact with those young minds and giving them that Afrocentric thought from that age and letting them grow into it. It's where we have to start, because they are our future. We're going to die out. We're older now. But if we don't reconnect with them, we're going to leave a division that will never be sewn back together. Our community, our fabric has been ripped, and it's almost ripped in two. So that, for me, that's my closing. You know, we have to reach back to move forward. We can't just keep moving forward in hopes of people getting it. We have to make sure they get it. I'm going to say this one last thing, Shuntray. I don't know. I did a lot of research on Jewish and the Holocaust and how that went down. And one thing they said was, how do we not let this happen again? We have to teach our children so that this will never happen again. How do we keep our lives or our kids from being re-enslaved mentally, physically? We have to teach our children. You have to go back to go forward.
Sound like you having a Sankofa moment.
Always.
Well, I want to again say where that baby at? I want to again say thank you guys for supporting me with this project. I really appreciate it. This is my first time doing a Zoom meeting, and when I tell you everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, but it's okay. As I continue, I get better. Yeah, man.
All right.
Well, I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. Thank you, my brother, Mr. Reverend Pitts.
Appreciate you. This was good. I look forward to the next one.
Yes, sir. Reverend Webb, I appreciate you. Apostle Shedrick, I appreciate you. Y'all have a blessed night.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.